Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back from another episode of the Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Censored subreddit. Let's get right into it. First, we have Fargo police refuse to apologize for jailing a Tennessee grandma on bogus AI evidence from Reason.com, posted by Jedi Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I don't think police should be jailing anyone based off of bogus AI evidence, but ultimately, police can justify jailing anyone for any reason they want to, because, they have the legal monopoly on the illegal use of force, and that means they can justify pretty much arresting anyone for whatever they feel like, and oftentimes you can't even hold them accountable for it, since they control the courts and the legal system as well, and that's personally why I would say the libertarian position is you gotta have a decentralized law enforcement, just like you gotta decentralize everything else, I would say. I think if everyone wants to act as their own law enforcement, that might be kind of chaotic, but I think it would be a lot more fair than having one centralized law enforcement system where everyone's forced to obey whatever the police are willing to enforce. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have Who Did We Secede From 250 Years Ago, Donnie, posted by Jedi Porcupine, and that's a truth from Donald Trump, who proved Melania and I are pleased to announce that Their Majesties, the King and Queen of the United Kingdom, will visit the United States for a historic state visit from April 27th to the 30th, which will include a beautiful banquet dinner at the White House on the evening of April 28th. The most momentous occasion will be even more special this year as we commemorate the 250th anniversary of our great country. I look forward to spending time with the King, whom I greatly respect. It will be terrific. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. And yeah, personally, I do think, we did secede from the British 250 years ago, but, Donald Trump, he always, likes to suck up to people, even if, you think it goes against, his narrative of being, if Trump is very much, if you suck his dick, he's gonna bend over backwards for you. Look at Zoran Mamdani. Trump should hate Zoran Mamdani as a woke Muslim socialist, but every time they've met in the White House, they seem to really get along. It just goes to show you that Trump really has no values other than you suck his dick, and he'll bend over backwards for you pretty much. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, the U.S. really is being ran by a petulant and spiteful child, posted by Ragnar OKXG, and that's crosspost from the Leopards Ate My Face subreddit, and that looks like a screenshot of a truth from Donald Trump. All of those countries that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which refused to get involved in the decapitation of Iran, I have a suggestion for you. Number one, buy from the U.S., we have plenty, and number two, build up some delayed courage, go to the Strait and just take it. You have to start learning how to fight for yourself. The USA won't be there to help you anymore, just like you weren't there for us. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done. Go get your own oil, President DJT. And yeah, personally, I don't agree with everything Trump says, but I definitely do agree that, countries should fend for themselves first and foremost. You can't always rely on someone else to be there for you. So, I definitely would kind of agree with that. And yeah, personally, I don't think the U.S. should have started the war in the first place. The U.S. and Israel, I should say. It was really Israel that was really pushing for the war. But, ultimately, now that it's happened and Iran's closed the strait, ultimately people have to find a way to get their own oil rather than, can rely off a country that won't let you take out their oil anymore. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, Iran has necessary will to end war, but by seeking guarantees, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian says, from Euronews.com, posted by Noam Sayin. And yeah, personally, I think that if Iran wants to end the war, it should be able to, but it doesn't want to end the war, it should be able to as well. Ultimately, people are going to justify what they justify, regardless of, based on their economic and social capital at any given time. And I think that's very much how the libertarian position works. If you want to justify surrendering to the U.S., you should be able to. But if you don't want to justify it, you shouldn't be able to be forced to as well. Ultimately, they can justify fighting for as long as they feel like, and if they want to resist for as long as possible, I think that's quite libertarian. I personally don't think the current Iranian regime is that libertarian, but I definitely do think the U.S. should focus on an America First foreign policy. I think it's interesting. Trump came in on an America First platform, but ever since his term started, he's been much more Israel first than America first. And I think that's very much, it goes to show, politicians will say one thing on the campaign trail and then do the opposite, and that gets into our our next post here, 10 years ago today, Trump promised to eliminate the national debt. Instead, it has doubled, from Reason.com, posted by Jedi Porcupine. And yeah, personally, it just goes to show you that, when you say one thing and then you do the opposite, I like a lot of Republicans market themselves as fiscally conservative, but in reality, it's all really a uniparty. They'll both spend like it's no tomorrow, and both of them keep moving the goalpost on what constitutes, foreign interventionism and all that. And it just goes to show you that, outside of a few wedge issues like abortion, LGBTQ, whatever other letters they've added as well, and a few others, ultimately, it's all just theater. They agree on like 95% of stuff, and that's why nothing ever changes. Obama campaigned on change, and Trump said he was going to shake things up, but ultimately, Washington never changes because it's all just political theater. It might as well be the WWE, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Kristi Noem blindsided by cross-dressing husband who put her at risk for blackmail, from theindependent.com, posted by Ninja Lover. And yeah, I think that's interesting. For years, Reddit has justified cross-dressing. Drag is practically one of Reddit's favorite things because, it's one of those woke LGBTQ, whatever other letters they've added as well things. But now that Kristi Noem, a member of the outgroup's husband, is doing it, suddenly it's the worst thing ever. It's a lot like how Reddit says, oh, you can't mock people for being LGBTQ, but then whenever the Republican National Convention starts, they say, oh, the rates of Grindr there are the highest in the world, and it just goes to show you they don't really have any principles, just who's in the outgroup, who's in the in-group. And yeah, personally, I think if Kristi Noem's husband wants to do cross-dressing, I think that's fine. But Reddit, if you're calling him out for it, you've been complicit in sexualized drag shows for children for years. Not to mention Drag Queen Story Hour, and you thought those were completely okay. Yet this guy's cross-dressing is the worst thing ever. It just goes to show you don't really have any values other than as I said, in-group, out-group. Next, we have Trump announces he is issuing an unconstitutional executive order to shut down mail-in voting nationwide, and he will defund states if they did not comply with him. From it's a Reddit link, image link from, I guess it's just a screenshot of Trump saying that on like a news network or something, posted by Donkey, and that's of course was from the Swamwa subreddit, which has since been removed by moderator, it looks like. But yeah, personally, I think, ultimately, when it comes to voting, the state can determine what constitutes a vote or not. I'm sure if Reddit had its way, every vote for a Democrat would be counted, regardless of how it's done, if it's done online or done just on a regular piece of paper saying, I vote for, like, Kamala Harris. But, if you voted for a Republican, it would be impossible to vote for a Republican because, they wanted Trump off the ballot. And it just goes to show you that, voting is very much forced collectivism. I think the Libertarian position is, if you want to vote among voluntary collectives, I think that's okay. But if you want to, when it comes to, voting on like a national scale, I think that's inherently forced collectivism. You shouldn't be forced to do it if you don't want to. And yeah, I think if people want to vote on like a local scale among all parties that consent, I think that's fine. But I think when it comes to like a national free scale of 300 million plus, I don't think that's very libertarian, especially since it's going to put someone in the position of state authority to enforce their will on people, and that's not something that's very libertarian, I would say. Next, we have Hegseth lifts suspension of Army pilots who flew by Kids Rock's house, says there won't be investigation, from CBSNews.com, posted by Woke Boogeyman, and that's a cross post from the Army subreddit. And yeah, personally, I think that, they should be held accountable, but ultimately, it doesn't really matter if the state usually doesn't hold itself accountable, because, ultimately they're the ones who make and enforce the laws, but who also run the legal system. And yeah, ultimately, sometimes people who should be held accountable won't be, and you just have to cope with it. Next we have, unless people support me, Trump habitually warns we won't have a country anymore, from Reason.com, posted by Jedi Porcupine. And yeah, personally, this is just another Orange Man bad day, 3,000, whatever we want this, I feel like 3,600 or something. And, ultimately, if you don't want to like Trump, I think that's fine. But, your politics should just go beyond Orange Man bad. It's very much how Reddit works, they can't really see politics beyond Orange Man bad and Republicans bad. Ultimately, if you just want to circle jerk how bad Orange Man is 24/7, I think that's fine. But, your politics should definitely go deeper than that. I'll have another post going into that later. Next, we have Borders, boycotts, and the World Cup, why global travelers are rethinking the U.S. in 2026 from Euronews.com. Or no, from eTurboNews.com, sorry, from the posted by The Way to Beauty. And yeah, personally, I think that, Reddit thinks the World Cup's not going to work, but the last two World Cups were in countries that were much more authoritarian than the U.S. currently, in Russia and Qatar, and they went off fine. I think this World Cup will probably go off fine as well, especially since the Club World Cup went off fine last summer. But Reddit always thinks that if anything related to Trump is going to be an inherent failure, and ultimately they don't think that that's fine. But that's very much how Reddit's a bubble. When it comes to what they think is going to work and what isn't going to work. I'm sure if they had it their way, we'd have mass re-education centers for Trump supporters. I personally have never supported Trump, but I don't think people should be forced into re-education centers without their consent. And it just goes to show you that, Reddit is very much a progressive woke circle jerk, pretty much regardless of subreddit. If you're not a progressive woke circle jerk, your subreddit's probably going to get banned, like the Libertarian meme subreddit was recently. Next, we have poverty in Argentina fell to lowest since 2018 under Milei from Bloomberg.com, posted by Socialist or Morons, and they added, I can't wait for the morons to move the goalpost. And yeah, personally, Milei, I don't agree with Milei on everything. He's a pretty big Zionist, and I'm pretty anti-Zionist. But regardless, I definitely do think he's probably one of the better world leaders from a libertarian perspective. I personally don't think the U.S. should have bailed out Argentina for using its own money. But, ultimately, I do think, I like a lot of what Milei's doing down in Argentina, especially, in regards to shrinking the size of the state and reducing all its poverty levels. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have a new U.S. missile hit a sports hall in Iran. Here's what we know about it from NYTimes.com, posted by Ninja Lover, and they added, a new army weapon emerged from relative obscurity after one struck a sports hall in school and discovered in Iran early in the U.S.-Israeli war, according to weapons experts and a visual analysis by the New York Times. Local officials cited Iranian media said the strike and others nearly killed at least 21 people, including young girls playing volleyball. And yeah, I personally don't think that's good, but ultimately, it doesn't really matter what branch of the uniparty is in charge. The U.S. is going to strike wherever it feels like, and I remember, I think a missile strike under Obama blew up a hospital, I think Afghanistan, and now that's memory hold. But ultimately, it just goes to show you that it doesn't really matter which branch of the uniparty is in power. The U.S. is going to keep throwing missiles in the Middle East, mostly, maybe some other countries as well, like Venezuela. And ultimately, there's nothing you can do about it. If I were to relentlessly bomb, drone strike, and missile the Middle East for years, I'd be held up as an international war criminal. But the U.S. government does it, and it's just any other day. It's to show you it's pirates and emperors. When an individual does something, it's a crime. But when the state does it, it's just the law. Next, we have Trump signs a constitutional executive order to shut down mail-in voting nationwide, and he will defund states if they do not comply with him. The DHS will prepare a list of citizens by state, and USP Best Buy will block mail-in ballots from anyone not on that list. From YouTube.com, posted by Woke Boogeyman. That's cross-post from the video subreddit, and that looks like a YouTube video from News Nation. And yeah, personally, as I said, I personally, I don't really care for voting as a whole, but ultimately, if when the person who's ever in charge of the state can justify enforcing whatever voting laws they feel like, I personally do think, I think the libertarian position is, if you do vote, you should put your money where your mouth is. I think, because when each side loses, they're gonna say, oh, voter suppression, fraud, etc., etc. So I think the libertarian position is maybe if we do have to have forced collectivist voting, we should have open ballot rather than mail-in ballots. But ultimately, it is at the discretion of whatever the state feels like, because when you're the one who's running the elections, you can decide what does and doesn't count, like that has a vote. Next, we have Trump, in historic first, attends Supreme Court arguments on birthright citizenship from abcnews.com, posted by Ragnarok XD, and that's cross-post from the Law subreddit. And yeah, personally, I think if he wants to attend the Supreme Court arguments, I think that's fine. Personally, I could go either way on birthright citizenship. Ultimately, citizenship is going to be at the discretion of whatever the state defines it as, and if they want to give people citizenship just for being born here, even if their parents aren't American, ultimately they can justify that. Personally, I would say a citizenship is something that you have to earn, regardless of whether you're born here or not, or if your parents are American citizens. You shouldn't just be given it for free, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have I Had an Epiphany, Socialism is the Best Political System, posted by RealDraw4713, and that's an article looks like they wrote for exitsetnow7.wordpress.com. And I responded to this on the Libertarian Party USA subreddit. I said, I know it's an April Fool's joke, but frankly, it doesn't really work on a platform where the vast majority say it every day unironically. If you want to do socialism, I think that's fine, but, don't force people to do something that they don't want to do. I think the libertarian perspective is, if everyone should have their own system. If they want to do socialism, capitalism, communism, fascism, etc., just by doing whatever you want, as long as you're not forcing other people to do it without their consent. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have Trump bullying allies to open Iran and suggests he knows the war is not going well, from Reason.com, posted by Jolly Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I don't think the U.S. should be bullying people to help in Iran, especially since they and Israel really started it. But ultimately, they can justify doing whatever they want. Ultimately, a lot of times, as I said, there's nothing you can do about it if you don't like it, since they're the ones in the position of authority and you aren't. As George Carlin famously said, it's a big club and you ain't in it, and they're the big club. And I was supposed to want to share the Libertarian Party USA subreddit as well. And I said libertarian perspectives on agenda setting theory. And I linked to the Wikipedia page for agenda setting theory. And I said, I definitely think it's a very important issue that doesn't get nearly the attention it deserves. A lot of what people care about in regards to whatever the most prominent political issue is in a given moment is due to whatever is being pushed into them through the media, be it legacy media or social media. Case in point, back in 2012, pretty much nobody cared about transgenderism, but then the legacy media started relentlessly pushing it for people like Laverne Cox and Caitlyn Jenner, and now nobody can shut the fuck up about it. Obviously, the media is going to report on whatever is going to draw the most engagement for them, but I think it's important for people to not let define whatever it is they care about in a given moment. It's like the current thing meme that gained attention a few years ago. When you move from one subject to the next based upon whatever is trending in a given moment, it shows that you simply care about whatever is being marketed to you at any given second, rather than having any actual deep political convictions, thoughts. And yeah, personally, if you want to follow what circles work, whatever the current thing is, be it Orange Man bad or trans genocide or ICE bad or whatever what current woke or MAGA circle jerk is, I think you should be able to. But ultimately, you should have. I think your political convictions should run deeper than that. You should stick to yourself rather than let society dictate what you believe, I would say. And that's very much how I think a lot of media works these days, be it social or legacy media. It's just pushing narratives of people, and then people circle jerking those narratives ad nauseum, and that can be very tiring after a while. And that's my thoughts on that issue. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.